Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Clackamas County Board of Commissioners Town Hall. I want to thank Rock Creek Primary School for allowing us to be here, as well as North Clackamas School District. What a great venue. I hadn't been in this school, but I've been in the Vern Duncan one, which was beautiful as well, but this is a fantastic school. My name is John Ludlow. Again, I'm Clackamas County Commission Chair. To my left is Paul Savas, Commissioner, and Commissioner Tootie Smith, Commissioner Jim Bernard, Commissioner Martha Schrader, and our County Administrator, Don Krupp. We're doing these town halls this particular one a little bit different than we've done in the past. We're trying to concentrate on two issues that we're putting before the voters. One is a marijuana 3% tax on retail sales, and the other one is a 6 cents per gallon fuel tax, which we can detail a little bit as we go along here. But those are the two areas we'd like to concentrate on. It doesn't preclude you from asking any question that you'd like from the audience. We're joined tonight also by, is Barb here? Barb Cartmill? Well, not yet, but we've got Mike Besner, our engineer, our road engineer, and he will be here to answer any questions that come up in regards to that proposal. We also have public affairs staff here, and this is being taped for video playing later on. So just know that it'll be broadcast. When you see it, it's too late, you can't come. So with that, again, we're happy that we have some in the crowd, and you may be able to ask multiple questions because of that. So I'd ask everybody to kind of condense your questions into about 1 minute, and then we can get as many answers forward as possible for as many people as possible. So with that, I'll open up the microphone and say, bring it on. And thanks for coming.
Come on up, Markley. I know you have a question, it's Bernie.
Well, actually, sure, I can say something.
Markley Drake is a city councilor in Happy Valley.
Yes. I guess I can ask a question. Have you done any polling on this road tax lately?
That's a
Good question.
It is a good question.
You know, it should be noted that we've been at this for about 2.5, 3 years. Actually, the original design for going out for a vote was worked on by C4, and Mr. Gary Schmidt of Public Government Affairs worked on that. And then I came in and said, you know, the polls were very poor. 51, 52%, it's not too exciting when you're going out for a vote. But they have improved. I think Mr. Schmidt's going to come up and tell us what the latest poll says here.
Thank you.
Good question, thank you.
Yes, Commissioners, in 2016, earlier this year, the Clackamas County Community Survey occurred, and at that time we asked the question, if the county enacted a $25 a year vehicle registration fee, would you support or oppose that fee? And 54% said they would support that fee. So that was the most recent transportation-related question we asked. We also asked similar questions on the 2016 survey. Do you feel roads are in good, excellent, or poor condition? And most people said they felt they were in good or excellent condition. Again, not understanding does the city or the county or the state own the roads. In 2014, that community survey from that year showed that people were concerned about potholes and the condition of their roads, but they were not willing to spend any additional resources to fix them. So those are our most recent polls.
So we have not done a poll specifically about the fuel tax.
We have not, correct.
Okay, well, it will be settled here real soon.
But
The poll's coming. We'll know it November 8th.
And in
That's when
May,
the poll results
however, we
roll in.
put a ballot measure question out, asking would people be interested in considering some form of mechanism to pay for road maintenance, and the answer was yes. So that's why it's on the ballot in November.
Gary, on the May advisory vote, what was the percentage of folks that asked us to put it on the November ballot?
My recollection was 68% supported a ballot question to oppose any increase in fees to pay for roads. So overwhelming support.
We could ask him one
I know a
question.
lot of us have been out working on this. Meeting staff has been doing the presentations, and the commissioners have been doing the advocacy, which we're allowed to do. And we've had some great questions and some great turnouts. So open it up for questions again. Anybody can come forward. Yes.
My name is Bill Mart. I'm live in the unincorporated portion of Clackamas County with a Westland address. I'm in the Stafford hamlet, and this question doesn't pertain to marijuana tax or road tax.
Okay.
In fact, it doesn't pertain to tax at all. It's a question for each of you. Do you support the Stafford hamlet compromise? And if not, why, and what elements would need to be included in that to allow you to support the compromise?
You know, in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter what we think. Metro has already made their determination on the Stafford area, as you well know, and sent that forward for our signature and authentication. But, you know, we have gone through this before, each of us, and I'm glad you're asking the question. I'll open up to the commissioners to answer it.
Great, thank you.
Well, I'd be happy to talk a little bit about it. We've had two presentations, one from the large landowner group and, of course, the Stafford Hamlet group. There's a significant difference between them. The Stafford Hamlet group is 110 households. That's not very much. And paying for 110 households would be cost prohibitive. But it's a start, as is the large landowner. So somewhere in between that and the two groups and Metro, there will have to be some sort of compromise. And that's what I plan on working on, and I assume we all plan on working on, something that may not satisfy everybody, but will, with the goal of satisfying as many as possible. The one area that people are comfortable with is the Borland area. If there is a possibility of transferring some density there, that might be something of interest. But we are still looking for employment lands, and the Borland area does offer some opportunity to do exactly that. So we've got a ways to go, but besides the fact, like John said, we're not going to be developing Stafford. That'll have to be up to the cities to make that determination, and the cities will determine the density that is required to provide those services. So all we're doing is trying to make sure that we have adequate land for employment and housing. And after that, the cities will determine what that density might be, along with some requirements of a state of Oregon and Metro.
I would just like to make a point too. I actually think the document is a very good working document, and I think you had a lot of citizen involvement kind of pulling that together. But I also think it's unlikely that there won't be some compromises made along the way. And again, I do agree with Commissioner Jim here, Commissioner Bernard, that what's really going to happen is it's going to be under the umbrella of a city. And so in the end, the negotiations and the framework will more than likely be under a city code, not under a county umbrella. I do know that at this point, Westland does not seem interested, Tualatin doesn't seem interested, and Lake Oswego has not indicated any desire that they would want to annex that area into it. But I think the fact that you have a framework that's been worked on will actually significantly influence any template, any zoning, any codes that eventually happen. And I can't even tell you how much time it would take. We could be talking a 20, 30, 40, 50-year window.
So, going to the second part of that question, you feel like, and I've heard this from all of you before, a certain degree of frustration with how Metro has laid this out and the inflexibility that you folks have been allowed in dealing with it. The purpose, as I understood the hamlet and villages, and it was your predecessors really, for the most part, that put this together. You might have been there.
I was there.
You might have been
I did it.
But the rest of
It's
you
all my
came on
fault.
after the fact. Was so
Yeah.
that this kind of politically charged, energized dialogue took place away from you guys. It took place someplace else and was brought to you to make a thumbs up, thumbs down, or do a little of this and a little of that, and we'll see what we can work with. So with that in mind, is there something that we should be doing collectively? I mean, we did reach out, ironically, to the pro-development community, just as we, as the hamlet and as a whole reached out to Borland. The challenge is the community isn't particularly in favor as a whole of seeing that dramatic a change occur, which is our visions and values statement. So someplace in there, we've got to find a way to make large landowners that see opportunity in development blend with smaller landowners that are there because they liked a semi-rural environment. And really, what I'm hearing, at least initially, is that there's not a lot that you feel like you can do, because it's not going to be your jurisdiction. If it ever does become developed, it's going to be Lake Oswego, West Lynn, or Tualatin. So is there something else that we, as a hamlet, should be doing that we're
Well,
not?
when I talked with Rich Cook and others, I encouraged them to reach out, and I know those guys did, to the three cities. Because as I said, it's their decision. The density, like Martha says, you think about that vast area there. Now, I know that the way that Stafford Hamlet had drafted the compromise, it showed that really the dense development would happen south of the Tualatin River. But, it really is up to a city who might want to take on a portion or all of this as to what they want to develop first. Those negotiations, again, especially since Metro said it will all be urban growth reserve, or urban reserve. They said it'll all be urban reserve, then nothing will happen without a city. And think about how long this will take. If a city, let's say Lake Oswego says, we're going to take some of Rosemont Road and we want to do a development there. They start heading down the hill. Let's say they get to Johnson Road, for example. I don't know that. But that alone would take a long, long time. Or conversely, if Tualatin said, we've changed our mind, we'd like to have that Borland area because it could be heavy economic development and the gross domestic product come out of there, then that's where they would start. And the question is, would all three cities eventually meet somewhere in there? That's all up to them and not to us at all.
Well, I think one thing we have to do is we have to resolve the question, and that's what is the capacity? What could we do? Is there an issue with water? My understanding is there are some areas where everyone couldn't be on wells because they would draw the water down. What is the transportation impact? So there needs to be a study, and Metro will probably, or at one point did offer some money to do that study, and the county would have to probably kick in some money to do that too. But I think there's a question out there that needs to be answered before everyone sits down and determines where do we go from here. And that's going to have to be a study. Everyone can't build wells and everyone can't put septic systems in. That means it's going to have to be connected to a district, a sewer water district most likely, and they're going to kind of decide on whether to bring a water line or a sewer line. The county doesn't do water, and so that'll have to be decided, and they'll have to be sure that it's enough investment for them to run a water line. So there's a lot to be studied yet before that determination's made.
I'd just like to add one of the reasons I was here when we did hamlets and villages, and it was largely so our rural unincorporated areas that their voices would not get lost in the shuffle. And I'm not sure even today that the cities are real fond of the notion that we did hamlets and villages, but I've always liked it because it gave people an opportunity to have a forum, to have a voice, and do a pushback if they so wanted to, if they lived outside of city limits. And it was pretty controversial, actually, because I was at a meeting with the cities, and they really were, I had to really use every negotiation skill and be as quiet as I could in saying, well, no, we are going to go ahead with this, and we think it's worthwhile for our rural unincorporated areas. From my point of view, Stafford's an interesting area, and if I were you folks, I'd continue to look at how things get developed in what I would call urban-rural interfaces. There's a lot of literature out there, and one of the things I liked about the compromise is I think you incorporate a lot of those ideas, allowing some development, but also kind of managing that with open space and, and riparian corridors and so on and so forth. So you will be ignored at at anyone else whoever is going to go into the Stafford Triangle. You will be ignored at their peril because you have a voice. So.
Well, and I think the other thing besides a voice is in creating the hamlets and villages, you gave us a format. You gave a structure on which to operate, and essentially it's the same structure that any public, meeting. And that's not that I don't appreciate more what you folks have to go through, because it can be annoying at times, but it does build a model that forces folks to come together and have that dialogue. So I didn't mean to make this quite as long, but I really do appreciate this. Was good. This was what we were Tootie.
Yeah, I just want to add that as far as the hamlets and villages, or CPOs for that matter, knowing what that community wants or what their aspirations or concerns or issues are is valuable. So I think that they serve a role regardless whether they're in the UGB or outside the UGB or poised to be annexed by a city or not. I would add that the vision plan that the area adopted in 09-10, I liked it. I thought it was a great plan. It's a concept plan, obviously. It's not a detailed plan, but one thing that hasn't been said that's really terribly important, and that is it needs to pencil out to bring the infrastructure in. So I think if the community can do anything further is settle as much of the disputes, and I think the compromise does a pretty good job of getting quite a ways towards that, but not completely. But I don't know, ideally, as we said, it's not our role, it's the city's role, whether one city takes either a big bite, the whole bite, or whatever it may be, but it'll need to pencil out. You need to have the finances there to say that there be a return on the investment or someone to pay for the infrastructure and not be overbearing. So maybe it comes in small sections by one city, and it started that way. I don't know the answer, but that'll be up to a city in the future.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
And now, with great excitement, they're lining up behind the microphone. Not so. So it's,
That's marijuana tax.
we can talk about things, maybe that'll get people going. Yes, you want to talk about it?
Sure. I wish I could remember the number. Last night we had it in front of us. We have a 3% marijuana tax. The voters voted to legalize marijuana. We've worked really hard to have some pretty tight rules. The 3% only gets us part way to actually funding enforcement. The state we're supposed to get money from, but OLCC spent a lot of money creating the program, and it might be a year before we see any of that. So we need to, we're asking the voters to let us allow a 3% sales tax, frankly, on marijuana, and we'll be using that money for both enforcement, work with the sheriff, code enforcement, and for youth programs to hopefully keep kids away from using marijuana. Today, John and I took a mental health first aid class, and I thought there was one comment about marijuana might have some psychotic, increase the possibility of psychotic episodes on children if they start too young. And I think that we have to be ready to, address that issue and God willing, keep marijuana out of the hands of kids. But we're hoping, does anyone know that number? 3-510, so we're hoping that you'll support 3-510. What's the gas tax one?
509.
3-509.
The current state tax is 25%. That will go down to 17% this next year, and that's where cities and counties can add in a 3% retail sales tax. Now, the state estimated how much money that they would be getting from the 25% tax, and they brought in 4 times that amount. So the estimates were very low initially, and now they're showing that they're going to be pretty high. Now, when will this craze for marijuana peak? And when will the operations of the growing operations peak? Because, you know, there's only a certain amount of residents in Oregon and only so much pot can be used. The question is, will they be exporting that to other states? We hope not. That wasn't the design from the seed to the plant idea. But, you know, we will appreciate the revenue. The AOC is working on getting us some higher revenue sharing, the cities and the counties, because right now, from the marijuana tax, they have, for example, 40% going into the Common School Fund. I don't necessarily know how that relates to the Common School Fund, and they're going to ask for a little bit higher percentage for the cities and counties. Specifically, we would probably use our money for just the very thing that Commissioner Bernard said, and that it would be public health when it comes to marijuana. So, you know, we would hope to share a little bit more revenue there, plus our 3% here, to work on code enforcement, law enforcement, and public health. So that's kind of a synopsis of it. Anybody else? All right. Now, let's talk about the road ahead then. The road ahead is a proposal by us. It was crafted really by a consortium of the commissioners. Commissioner Smith said, you know, we got to sunset this thing, because if we're going to earn the public trust, then we have to prove that we're going to keep our word when we give it. So our word is that we're going to have 7 years, and during that time, we'll collect a little over $37 million for the county, and 40% of our tax will go towards the cities to use as they wish, maintenance or capital construction. So after those 7 years are up, we'd have to probably come talk to you, but at that time, we would have completed 47 different projects that are important to the county and really covering a great deal of the county. Let's remember this. We are going down $17.5 million per year aggregately in maintenance only. This $5.3 million is a Band-Aid, but it, again, is about establishing the public trust on promises that we make, and hopefully having them realize that our roads are not in the shape they think they are in unincorporated Clackamas County. I often say, like, that, you know, Clackamas County has the most roads to take care of any county. 1,400 miles is like jumping in your car and driving to Mexico. That's how many miles we have. And so we hope to catch up on some of those, keep our arterials and collectors working, and someday getting in some of those cul-de-sacs that we're responsible for in Oak Grove, Oak Lodge, that have gone without any work for 35 plus years in some cases. So that's a synopsis of that, Jim.
I'd like to add that, you know, lots of people say, well, you guys get a lot of taxes from us already. You're about to get your property tax bills, and I'm sure you're going to think exactly that. But we can't use property tax to pay for roads. That's the law. I mean, so we can't dip into those dollars. We can only use the gas tax and federal tax and vehicle registration fees that we get from for roads. Can't use your property taxes. So we're kind of limited, and since the gas tax hasn't increased at the federal level since 96, 98, something like that. And you can imagine, I don't know about you, but prices seem to have gone up quite a bit. It is an oil, blacktop's an oil product, made of some sort of parts of oil, and petroleum. And so, and petroleum prices are certainly much higher than they were in 98, as well as labor, equipment prices, and all those other things. So we really don't have a choice. And in my opinion, we have a responsibility to future generations to preserve our assets.
This has essentially been my third time at the try with this, because we recognized back when I was first here in 2003 that we had a problem, and it was only going to get worse. And it's been good to work with colleagues now in 2016 and previous who understand that this has been an ongoing problem, and it's largely directed at our rural roads and safety. Capital construction is a totally different issue, and it is really funded by different sources, largely federal, state, and so on. This is largely directed towards the maintenance of those 1,400 miles.
The other thing ought to be said is that for every dollar we collect in tax, essentially we'd be saving about $13 of repairs that had we not had that dollar, the problem will grow to be 13 times higher. So that's another way of looking at it. And we have been fighting this for a long, long time. And it should be noted that the state gas tax amount hasn't changed in decades, and of course inflation has taken effect. And the cost of roads and repairing roads is way higher, and the cost of petroleum and asphalt, a ton of asphalt and so on, has all gone up. So this is, more of a savings in a sense, if you can look at it that way. And that's how we're looking at it, because we just simply can't afford to have the roads diminish any farther in repair. Back when we were logging and we had a lot of revenue from logging, some of that money was allowed to be used for roads and helped pay for the roads. So since logging has ceased and those monies cease to come in, we have far less money, in the millions less than we had before. So this is a kind of a dire situation, and all five of us agree that this is something that we need to repair, and we need it. It's the responsible thing to do. And not to bring it to the voters is, I would think, be irresponsible. So we're going to have to do something with that to keep up. And as a population grows in Clackamas County, we have more and more people that are driving on these roads and wearing them out.
You might note that you will see in the voters pamphlet a statement by all of us, paid for individually, not by your county dollars, supporting this gas tax, fuel tax. We did the same thing on a voters pamphlet in May, convincing people. We hope to give us an opportunity to put this on in November. But people can talk about our disparate views, but on this one we gelled behind this issue. All right. Now we've talked about marijuana tax. We've talked about fuel tax. Anybody else?
There's a question.
Yes.
This is actually revisiting the marijuana tax.
Sure.
But just a filler detail, I was wondering if we have any projections of just how many retailers we're going to have in Clackamas County.
Well, the interesting thing is, it's retailers in unincorporated Clackamas County, as you know. Now, I don't know how many there are currently, but there's been some preliminary estimates as to how much money this would bring in. Paul, what was that? 180, was it?
Well,
170.
originally, before the voters, right around the time the voters voted on it, we were estimated to see $2 or $3 million a year into the county. And a year later, that was re-estimated at $200,000 to $300,000. So it's woefully less. So it is based on sales to some degree, but I'm going to guess we have maybe 4 or 5 retailers in the county right now in unincorporated Clackamas County. I don't know.
I think there's 4 on Oak Grove Boulevard.
There's more.
On McLaughlin Boulevard.
Well, one's in Milwaukee and 3 are unincorporated.
180, somewhere around there is the estimate so far.
In Clackamas?
Yeah.
180?
$180,000.
180,000.
Oh, I think the question originally was how many retail outlets were
Yeah,
there?
well, there's much more than 4. I'm sure there is.
Well, you said 4.
There's one no, you said 4.
No, I didn't say that.
No, I said 4.
You said
No,
4.
I said, somebody
You
said
said,
4.
yeah. You said
Pick a number, anyone.
We
Pick a number.
can check with planning tomorrow and take and see what the permit is.
Actually, you'd have to check
activity
because they
has
have
been.
licenses. You'd have to check with OLCC.
Yeah, there'll be more opening. Let's do that.
Okay.
For right now, we'll accept that.
Compromise.
Absolutely, that's what we're all about. All right, ladies and gentlemen, unless you get up that microphone, this night could be a lot shorter than what we planned. We had this planned for an hour and a half. We're glad to continue to entertain questions, if there are any. Markle, you're awful quiet, man. Yeah.
Sure, you got one? No.
You can keep us from having individual performances.
Yeah, no. On the marijuana issue, I know you're talking about the number of retail outlets, right? That's what you're talking about, is the
Yeah.
4 to 6. I do believe the number is somewhat higher because we're getting applications. We're going to have 2, if not 3, in Happy Valley. That gives you an idea. And I know that we've had other people talk to us from unincorporated that want to either annex in or talk to us about what our regulations are. So I think you're going to see that quite a bit more. But have you done any polling to see how many retail stores you're going to do or any kind of thing from?
Are your regulations going to be less than the county's regulations?
Actually, they're a little more stringent.
Are they?
Yes. Slightly. Is that right? Yes.
If Jamie says so, that's the way it is. That's
Yep.
right. You know,
Because she worked on it.
Yeah.
My guess is we will, besides, they're talking in Salem about combining medical and retail.
Yeah.
So the retail, then they'll all be taxed. And, we could have 50 of them in the county easily.
Oh, gee,
We
Jim.
could easily have 50. I mean, you head up towards the mountains and on the way to some of the smaller communities, you're likely to see a lot of them.
Yeah, have you ever driven in Portland?
Oh, man.
I-
That green cross is everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah. I go down Foster Road, there's probably 8.
Oh, it's amazing.
So it's a bunch. Well, good luck with that.
Wow, thank you.
Thanks, we're all excited.
And on that note that Jim brought up, the AOC has been working on this, and they didn't think that there'd be any movement this legislative session, a full session, to combine the two. It's ludicrous that the Oregon Health Authority and OLCC are separate entities with different rules, different enforcements. It's nuts. And they absolutely need to be combined. And actually, Rob Bovet, the attorney for the Association of Oregon Counties, said that perhaps it won't even go to the OLCC, which is the big dog, of course, and it won't go to the OHA. They may go with a kind of a marijuana enforcement board or something like that and recreate more government. Oh, boy. So anyway, there's a possibility that they'll be under one roof here after this legislative session, which we heartily back, and we will be down there legislatively definitely supporting. So, you can't have a party and nobody came.
Okay.
All right, any more questions? Oh,
Well,
go ahead,
do you
Jim.
want to talk a little bit about Damascus or anything like that?
I want to throw this third one in before we do that. The sheriff is coming out for replacing his levy, and that with the same amount he's been charging. Now, this levy is, again, I emphasize the same, and there is some push for him to increase that, to open our additional 26 beds in the jail, for example. But he's held the line. I really appreciate that in him. It's not dissimilar, by the way, to the North Clackamas School District, who's going out for a replacement of the same amount they'd been charging. So this is holding the line, and I think people should appreciate that he is holding the line, and it could have dire effects if it didn't pass. This means in the neighborhood of 80 jail beds, 60 patrol officers. So these are important people out there. We don't want to lessen our presence and for public safety out there. We want to enhance that as we can. But I think the sheriff's done a good job in holding that line, and I recommend that people, again, just renew, and that's all you're doing, renew his levy.
Let me throw one more in there.
Sure.
And that's the Boring Fire District annexation to Clackamas Fire District number 1. And again, I wish I had the measure in front of me, the number. Boring will be voting on 2 measures, and the county members who are part of North Clackamas Fire District will be voting on 1 to allow Boring to annex to the fire district, and and there will be no tax increase. It's at the current rate, and then the Boring rate would be increased because they're going to the Clackamas County rate. And then last year or 2 years ago, the voters passed a bond to build some more fire stations, and people in Boring will also vote on that part, and they all have to pass in order for that to take place. And I can tell you that, Clackamas Fire is a fantastic organization. Milwaukee used to be contract with the fire district, and we annexed at no increase in taxes. And so hopefully you guys will take a look at that, vote down the ballot, and make sure you vote in favor of those three measures.
I have one.
Okay.
So I know the state is always, the voters have always voted down a sales tax, so let's talk about Measure 97, which is really, it is Measure 97, right?
Yeah, 97.
Yep, Measure 97. So it really is a sales tax, but instead of taxing the individual folks who purchase something, they're actually taxing the sellers. So that effect will be a trickle-down effect where we'll have to raise the prices to compensate. So it's a sales tax, but we're just taxing a different group of folks, group of people. So our food, and anyone that sells over $25 million of products, not profit, but sales, car dealers, food, hospitals, you name it, all those are generated sales, and those are Oregon companies for the most part. And I know it's being advertised as some out-of-state companies, and sure, there's some of that, but this is really going to affect Oregonians in a big way. And I think we need to be cognizant of that and do your research on this one. They have to pass the cost on, so it's not as though the prices aren't going to go up. And I've heard estimates of up to $600,000 or $600 per year per person in each household. So if there's 2 or 3 people in your household, you can multiply that times 2 or 3. John, Tootie, you want to add? Martha?
You know where
Neither
this,
that?
I think I have a great sensitivity to it is, you know, you say $600, and many of us could afford that. In fact, Jim and I were talking to a retirement center last night where the people were retired evidently quite well based on where they live. But if you talk about people on fixed income, those are the people who are going to hurt, because you say $50 to $100 a month, that puts them in dire straits. $50 to $100 a month, when we talk about the subsidized housing, which we work on and we put together, $50 to $100 a month is huge money, and there's no reason why these people should be paying that. This is on pharmaceuticals. This is on electricity. So it hits our vulnerable people very hard. And there's a compounding too, because if there's 3 suppliers, an intermediary, a warehousing, a jobber, so somebody brings it in from out of state, 6%. Then the next person has to add 6% to that, and that can go on 3 to 4 times, stacking it up, so when the consumer pays, they'll pay. Now, a gentleman came and testified to us when we were considering a resolution on this. He says, you know, this will have no effect, because the price of Cheerios, for example, in Alaska, is the same price as here. I looked that up, because that kind of drove me nuts. I've been to Alaska, and everything I touched was hugely expensive. And I looked up groceries, and there's no way Cheerios cost the same in Alaska as it does here. So he's trying to tell us that this will be absorbed by companies. Oh, no, it's not. And let me give you an example. McKesson Drug. McKesson Drug is the only warehouse in the state of Oregon holding pharmaceuticals. So you talk about if there's a disaster, they're pretty important people. They operate on a 1.5% profit margin. Now this would be 2.5%, and they qualify, they'd be one of the people paying. Do you really think they're going to pay 1% out of their profits to keep the pharmaceuticals alive in Oregon? No, they're not. They're going to pass on that 2.5% again to some of the most vulnerable people. The people, a lot of them just can't afford this. So it has dire consequences. I like the most recent poll. The first one we saw was that it had a 60% chance of passing. The latest one is under 50%, and that's the way it should be. I appreciate the advertising and really educating the public about the dire consequences here. We all know the legislature has the power to do what they want, and I hope they'll rein in that supermajority and the emergency clauses that they are pulling down there. But the fact of the matter is that we cannot let this thing pass. It will have dire consequences on those who are most vulnerable.
Well, you know, I own a small business, and while I agree we need to do tax reform, I don't have 25 million in sales, but I can walk into my parts room and look on every part that is on my shelf and tell you that none of them are made in Oregon. And most of them sell millions to Oregon. So I will have to pass that on to my customers. And so everybody will be impacted by this tax. And, you know, I don't mind paying taxes. And I wouldn't mind having a discussion about tax reform. but I don't think this is the way to do it.
And I guess I would like to add to that a little bit because, governance by initiative doesn't always give you the results that you want. And I've said this before, back when Measure 5 kind of passed, I was one of the school teacher librarians who was reduced in force because, that had unintended consequences in our schools. And it seems to me that a better way to enact tax reform is at the legislative level with the input of what I call key stakeholders. We have one of the most progressive business communities, I think, than any other state that surrounds us. Having worked with many of them, traded sector down through the small business folks, they want to have tax reform. They just want to be at the table to be part of the conversation so you can limit any unintended consequences. And as I said, I think my colleagues have already outlined what those unintended consequences would be with this. It's not that they don't want to pay their fair share of taxes. So when you have political sound bites that sound very, very engaging and intriguing, and oh yeah, they're going to pay their fair share. Be very careful and be more of I guess I would always advise my students, be more of a critical thinker to look behind the scenes, in a sense, to see what those consequences. So just, as I said, governance by initiative is not the way to go with this. I think tax reform needs to be enacted I wish the governor would step up to the plate, quite frankly, and pull together a group of legislators, businesses, the school system folks, the nonprofits, and figure this out. So,
To me, this whole campaign has been one of the most disingenuous campaigns I've really seen in my 25 years of advocacy as a grassroots representative in Oregon. First, they come out and create a crisis. We need this for our children. And if you ever notice, whenever there's a cry, we need this for their children, people come running through, and this is the reason we pass taxes. It was promised by the proponents of this that it would go to education. And what else did they promise?
A senior?
Yeah, seniors and one other. They promised no, they did not promise PERS, but this is my point, is they promised it would go to the most valuable and it would be targeted to that. But I can assure you, being a former state legislator, I was selected to serve on the Ways and Means. I was in leadership. I can assure you that unless it's a constitutional measure, those legislators will take that money and they will spend it on whatever they want. And then you have to ask yourself, well, who's pushing this? Who's behind this? There's every single union in Oregon is pushing this measure. Why? So they can keep their government jobs, and some of those government jobs are much higher that they're paying in the private sector. And frankly, we've got a PERS deficit for our public sector retirees that is insurmountable. It's because the failure of our legislature, who's been dominated by one party for the last 10 years, failing to address a huge financial problem. Now, if Oregonians want to keep going down this path of not addressing our problems, putting more money on the burden of the shoulders of the taxpayers, go ahead, but then don't complain to maybe your county commissioners sitting here, well, geez, I can't afford this, when what we're trying to do is get 6 cents from people to fill our potholes and pave our roads. 6 cents, which is the equivalency of $25 a year, is all. So we decided, from a governance standpoint, and we took the leadership in this county, we passed a resolution to defeat Measure 97. And I think that's really important for people to know out there, because it's a hoax and it's a lie.
I'll just say one more thing on this, and that is if the tax was on the over $25 million of profit,
Right.
not sales, we would have a completely different conversation.
Absolutely.
It's gross receipts.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a sparse crowd tonight. And in fact, we've got some employees, probably as many employees here as we have visitors. This is probably one of our least attended town halls, and I think it's our, Don, is this our second to the last one, or is it the last one we have this? This is the last one this calendar year, and we'll analyze how we're going to go forward in that regard. I want to thank you all for coming tonight, but we're probably going to adjourn.
Thank you.
I want to thank you all for coming, and this meeting is adjourned.